So I'm someone who historically, if I was ever offered tofu, someone had made a dish with tofu in it, I'd have loads of really great, polite reasons why I kind of would have to kind of decline it, or, you know, would kind of find any reason why not. What possible reason would I have for wanting to choose that over something more substantial, you know, like chicken or beef or something like that? Tofu is now something that I eat regularly, probably 2 or 3 times a week, and it's become a really major part of my diet, and really that if you understand it better, that it could be a really fantastic addition to kind of your repertoire. There are 5 pretty simple to implement changes that you can make that, if you kind of bear them in mind when you are cooking with tofu, will make a huge difference. Without further ado, let's get into those 5 reasons. Mistake number 1 is buy the right tofu. And what does this actually mean? It's of course subjective. There are loads of brands out there. All supermarkets, most places you'll go, you'll be able to find at least one brand. This was completely new ground for me when I first started shopping for tofu, and I think I made some assumptions that just the most popular or maybe the cheapest was the one to go for, and I heard that there was these different types and all this stuff. In this video, I'm going to be talking specifically about firm tofu. There are loads of different types like silken tofu, medium tofu, super firm tofu. They all have different uses, different brands offering those varieties. Tips I'm going to be talking about in this video generally apply to firm or super firm tofu, but I think that they could be applicable across the board. My key piece of advice when talking about buying is go to your local Asian supermarket. If you're not an adventurous shopper, you're someone who feels really comfortable going to one place, I would really encourage you to step outside of your comfort zone and give it a go. There will, without a doubt, be tofu at your local Asian supermarket. What I found, it is by far and away better tasting than big brands that I've been seeing at large supermarkets. Personal favourite that I found so far is Tofu King. I've honestly just found it to be completely different to other big brands. I don't want to kind of call out other brands which, you know, I personally don't enjoy, but I found that the texture is like super creamy and smooth, and generally just try it for yourself. You might find that if you didn't enjoy the texture of some of the other more well-known brands, that if you venture into an Asian supermarket, you will find, in my opinion, some like much higher quality tofu. And the best part is that it's like half the price than you'll find in these big supermarkets. So it's like a massive win-win. For me, it feels like the biggest hack in the tofu buying world. It's like a no-brainer, give it a go, and you might find that that on its own is a huge step change in the quality that you're getting from your tofu. Now, mistake number 2 is you shouldn't be pressing your tofu. This, I think, when I first started learning about how to cook with tofu, was the first piece of advice that I heard, which was you need to take it out of this packaging, it's going to be full of water, and you need to press it and squeeze all the water out, and then you need to rest some heavy books on it for like half an hour at least, which to me was like, wow, I can't believe this is like the first stage of cooking this thing, which at the time I wasn't even that excited to eat, so it was like a huge barrier. Some really key learnings are that there's loads of great alternatives to pressing it that are more effective and faster. So again, this is like another huge win-win. If you can do it quicker and it's more effective, then why not? The point of removing all the water is because when we're cooking with it, we want to get a nice crisp exterior, and if there's loads of water inside the tofu, of course, as you're cooking it, this is going to be released, and there's never going to be a chance to get this browning on the exterior of the tofu, which is why sort of pressing it for an extended period of time. My favourite 2 methods are either to simmer tofu in a liquid. It infuses the tofu with a flavour, especially if you're cooking in a stock or something well seasoned. But the really cool one is to actually microwave the tofu for, I tend to kind of chop a block in half and just throw it in the microwave on full power for about 5 minutes, and that'll do a really great job of just drawing out all the water, and you're like ready to go super quick. So that's mistake number 2. Don't press it, you're wasting your time, and it's not even the best way to do it. So simmering or microwaving is the way to go, if you're asking me. So mistake number 3 is not battering or breading your tofu. This, for me personally, was like a really big kind of game-changing idea, because especially when you're dealing with something which doesn't feel very familiar, if it's a new ingredient to you and you're like me and you grew up on, like, you know, popcorn chicken and stuff like that, this is a really great stepping stone to making something which has this added layer of texture. And if you season your breadcrumbs or your batter properly, then you're also adding another level of flavor as well. The result is something which tastes really familiar, because it's kind of like this crispy sort of becoming closer to something that you're used to eating. And I think that that is another kind of barrier removed to trying something new, is having something familiar with it. So I definitely recommend that trying out before you fry your tofu. We're basically going to be using the moisture of the tofu, a little bit of the excess moisture of the tofu, to coat the exterior, and then fry it in a pan with hot oil. And it's like a really fast way to just give it another extra layer of crunch. I definitely do recommend removing some of the water, probably by microwaving it is the way that I would recommend in this case, because then once you start cooking, the gap between the tofu and the batter isn't going to be broken up by moisture escaping. So it's really important at this stage that you have at least a good majority of the interior water of the tofu removed. So definitely use step 2 here in terms of removing moisture to make sure you've got a nice crispy batter, doesn't end up soggy or kind of really breaking away. I like to take a really big bowl, mix it up, get all the tofu covered, and then you can literally just throw it in a pan. Then you've got great, delicious, crispy tofu. Such a great way to elevate it really quickly, you know, no fancy ingredients, really cheap. If you don't have corn flour, you can substitute it for plain flour very easily. Corn flour is better, but it's a very easy substitution. So definitely give that a go. If you have only ever tried eating tofu on its own without any kind of coating, this is elevate it as an ingredient. Mistake number 4 is cooking your tofu in a crowd. There are certain dishes where this suits it really well. So for example, like a curry, especially if it's not coated in anything, you can get away with simmering it in a curry or a sauce. But in this context, I'm talking about something like a stir fry. What you're doing is throwing it into the pan with everything else. And it's really important that as soon as the tofu hits the pan, that it gets a high level of heat contacting the surface area, and that it's not, then 2 things will happen. One is that it's not going to get as much contact with the surface area of the pan, which is really going to impact the speed at which it starts to crisp up. And second of all, as the veg starts to cook, moisture is going to be simmering out of, you know, broccoli and veg and stuff like that. And it's going to mean that you're going to be cooling the surface area of the tofu. Your batter's going to start falling apart. It's not going to be getting the level of heat that it needs, so you're not going to get the reaction that you're looking for. So my go-to move when doing this is get my pan on heat, bread my tofu, throw it in the bowl, and then throw it in a pan with the hot oil on its own, purely on its own, and let it really crisp up and really set that exterior coating. And then once it's done, I like to remove it from the pan, set it aside in a bowl, and then throw in all my veg and really stir fry that up on a pretty high heat. This generally only takes 2 to 3 minutes to cook down. And then I'll add in kind of any sort of sauce or noodles or rice that I'm doing in my stir fry. And then at the very final stage, just 30 seconds to a minute before I'm finished, I'll throw in the tofu that we finished earlier, because at this point all it needs is heating through, the crust is really nicely set. But timing is really key in this case. Don't put your tofu in a crowd, especially if you're breading or battering it, because it's going to be a soggy mess. Okay, for my final mistake that I'm going to go, and I think this kind of follows in the theme of like not giving tofu the kind of same thought that you would with maybe like a more traditional protein, like meats, for example, in the form of giving it garnishes and sauces and that kind of thing. This final stage, kind of exterior level of the tofu, I think this is another great opportunity to be layering in more flavor, more texture, something more exciting. And I think this is true with any cooking, and I think that's maybe sometimes people just forget to give the same treatment to something like tofu. So at this stage, I think it's a great opportunity to add on a sauce, like a sweet chili sauce or a teriyaki glaze. And then other textures you can always consider, like you know, some really fresh spring onion or some sesame seeds or some crispy onions, you're gonna have loads of layers to this dish. Tofu's gonna have really solid texture, whether you go down like a just crisped up in a pan or breaded or battered. The texture's gonna be there. There's gonna be flavor running all the way through. I think another layer for me that really makes a huge difference is the texture of and the kind of mouthfeel that comes with a glaze or a sauce. That would be my final suggestion, is really think about what can I add to the final stage, the final level of this dish to really bring some big flavors, some big textures, and I think like mouthfeel at this stage is where you can really bring it to that next level. So those are my 5 key mistakes that I made when I first started cooking with tofu. I hope that some of this has given you some ideas, some inspiration, maybe identified some areas where you tried some tofu before, you had a dish which was a bit lackluster, and you kind of think, oh, you know what, maybe that would have made a pretty big difference. I hope that you give it a go, try some of these steps. Let me know in the comments if you've got any other really great techniques or ideas or methods that you've come across that has made a big difference to your cooking with tofu. Just want to say thank you very much for watching. I've really enjoyed sharing these ideas with you, and I hope you have a great day.